Number 10. The USS Hornet. During World War II in October 1942, the Battle of Santa Cruz Island took place between U.S. and Japanese forces. Many lives were lost and many great war machines were destroyed in the water and sunk without a trace. One of those war machines was the USS Hornet, a U.S. aircraft carrier that was attacked by the Japanese Navy. After a heavy bombardment and 4 torpedo strikes, it sank to a watery grave in the Pacific near the Solomon Islands. The mighty ship remained undiscovered for 77 years. In 2019, sonar imaging and the use of an underwater research vessel called Petrel revealed where it had ended up. But the astonishing thing about the USS Hornet was not that it had finally been found, but the condition the ship was still in. First up were the sonar images, which showed the vessel was actually laying upright on the seabed. Thanks to the depth at which the Hornet had descended, 17,500 feet below the surface, it remained virtually untouched by ocean life and decay. Images captured by the RV Petrel show intact wiring on the vessel's anti-aircraft guns and an aircraft tug that's neatly parked on its deck as if nothing had happened. The Hornet is so untouched that you can even read the manufacturer's name on its side with ease. Although deep underwater, the USS Hornet gives us an amazing insight into the valiant efforts of the U.S. Navy during the Battle of Santa Cruz Island and more. Number 9. The vehicles of Lake Como. Lake Como in Italy is a playground for the super rich. It has historical villas, picturesque views, and isn't too far from skiing spots in the Alps. But the most surprising thing this location has to offer isn't the chance to see a celebrity, but what lies underneath its waters. This 1,394 feet deep lake is an underwater museum. Not only is it home to freshwater marine life, secret underwater tunnels and caves, but you can find all sorts of sunken vehicles from historical moments. It has everything from wooden gondolas to a big steamer named the Plinio, which was built at the start of the 20th century. Lake Como even serves as an automotive museum, since you can find many rare and classic cars and mopeds submerged here, such as a Piaggio moped, a Mini, a Fiat 124 sports car, and even a Land Cruiser. You can even spot a truck with 2 red motorbikes strapped to the back parked neatly by the lake bed. Some of the most interesting things under the waves come from the assortment of items and vehicles from World War II. For example, near the Lecco province is an Italian tank that is slowly being covered by the mud and silt on the lake floor, with all of its guns, ammunition, and cannons still intact. There are also many seaplanes that were purposefully sunk by a nearby aeronautical club near the end of the war, and it's even reported that a motorboat belonging to the fascist dictator Benito Mussolini is here too. The vehicles aren't the only reminder of World War II in Lake Como, since the German forces used it as a dumping ground for many of their weapons and equipment during their hasty retreat at the end of the war. Number 8. The passenger jet in the Red Sea. Although most of the vehicles in this video are underwater thanks to a crash or an accident, the Lockheed Martin L-1011 TriStar passenger plane in the Red Sea was actually meant to have its final resting place at the bottom of the waves. The plane is truly a sight to behold, with its massive silhouette on the seabed. Using one of the side doors, any diver that's brave enough can make their way through the plane and explore the cockpit of this sunken giant. But why is it even down there? After serving its purpose as a passenger jet from the 80s through the early 2000s, the Lockheed Martin plane was left to deteriorate on land at King Hussein International Airport until it was moved from this spot in 2019 as part of a project to help not only tourism in the area, but also to provide a home for marine life. The plane is now doing its job well. Not only do tourists flock to the Gulf of Aqaba in Jordan for diving, but the sea creatures love it too. The wreckage is home to species of coral and schools of fish. Scuba divers have even reported octopi hunting and feeding near the cockpit. Number 7. The 1850s steam trains. Almost 40 years ago in 1985, a diver named Paul Hepler was scanning the ocean floor off the coast of New Jersey when his equipment detected something big was nearby. He went to check it out and could not believe what he saw. His magnetometer led him straight to the site of 2 steam locomotives laying in the bottom of the water. They were encrusted in barnacles and other marine life, but were otherwise easily recognizable. Smaller than regular trains, further studies revealed they were both Model 222T type trains. They were mainly used in train yards, but with no sign of any other vehicles or a shipwreck nearby, how did they get there? The thing is, no one really knows the answer to this question, since there's no record of 2 trains getting lost in the area. Some people have theories that maybe they were being transported by ship and slipped off the deck in poor weather conditions. Either that or they were deliberately pushed off of the ship to stop it from sinking during a storm. You'd think someone would mention losing 2 massive pieces of cargo. 160 years after it's believed that they sank, the locomotives are still attracting visitors to this day. They're upright on the seabed, and some divers even think they look like they're racing each other side by side. Would you like to dive down and see for yourself? Tell us in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. Number 6. The Steamboat Phoenix. Deep under Lake Champlain in Vermont lies one of the oldest steamboat wrecks in the world. Discovered using a remote-controlled underwater vehicle, Gray Lefebvre was able to use its camera to spot the wooden wheels poking up from the lake bed. Knowing this was an unusual find, he got in touch with an expert named Chris Sabick, who was able to analyze the footage and figure out that this was the wreck of the Phoenix, a steamboat with a long and interesting history. The Phoenix was designed as a passenger boat to ferry people across Lake Champlain. It was fitted rather luxuriously for its time, with separate cabins for men and women, a bar, a smoking lounge, and even a barber shop. It sounds more like a modern cruise liner, which is remarkable considering it first floated in 1815. The Phoenix is over 200 years old. The ship was even selected to take one of America's presidents, James Monroe, traveling through the region's Lake Champlain covers, all the way up to the Canadian border. Not many ships can claim that. Sadly though, just 4 years after it first set sail, the Phoenix suffered a catastrophic fire on board. Although many were able to make it out on lifeboats, there were still 6 casualties in the blaze. Not to mention the steamboat itself didn't rise from the ashes like its namesake, but instead sunk down to the watery depths below. Number 5. The Britannic. You've probably heard of the ill-fated Titanic, the famous ship that hit an iceberg and sank into the freezing depths of the Atlantic Ocean. But did you know it had 2 sister ships? The first and oldest of the 3 was the Olympic. It was launched in 1910 and served through World War I as a troop transport vessel. It was even nicknamed Old Reliable. She returned to being a luxury liner at the end of the war until eventually she was sold for scrap pieces in 1935. But the ship we're looking at today is the youngest of the 3 and was named the Britannic. The Britannic was going to be a passenger cruise ship like her siblings, but instead became a hospital ship during the war, providing aid to wounded British soldiers. The HMS Britannic was great at her job, patrolling the Mediterranean and back up through the UK on multiple trips to take back injured servicemen. But in 1916, tragedy struck, and the Britannic hit a mine in the Aegean Sea. It ripped open the starboard side of the ship, and she sank within an hour as the water rushed in through the gaping hole caused by the explosion. But the crew and people on board the Britannic have her older sister to thank. Following the sinking of the Titanic, safety modifications were made so that lives could be saved. Only 30 of the 1,100 people on board lost their lives. As for the Britannic herself, she lies on her side on the seabed, the prow of the ship sheared away from the rest of it, but still laying close by. You can see the studded dots of its portholes, along with the shadows of the cabins, masts, and winching equipment. In 2020, the Greek government discussed opening the wreck up to public divers, so soon more people will be able to experience this piece of history up close for themselves. Number 4. The DDay Tanks of Selseyville. 2 tanks and 2 armored bulldozers were going to Juno Beach on the Normandy coast to help in the D-Day landings as part of the joint collaboration between British and Canadian forces. Unfortunately, these rare machines never made it to their final destination. Sadly, their landing craft overturned on the morning of June 6, 1944, sinking the vehicles to the bottom of the channel in the southeast of England. Strangely enough, though, there's no record of the vessel they were being transported on anywhere near the site, which left divers and historians with many unanswered questions. Despite this, the vehicles themselves are amazing in their own right. The tanks are British Centaur CS-4 tanks, making them extremely rare. Only 80 were used during the D-Day landings, many as part of Operation Overlord, and only 2 survived to this day on land. The bulldozers, on the other hand, were even more unusual. As modified Caterpillar bulldozers, they and other machinery were nicknamed Hobart's Funnies. Named after the man that commissioned them, their adaptations were pretty strange. The bulldozers are helping to answer some questions about the Funnies, since only one other one exists besides those that lie in a watery grave. Historians were eventually able to crack the mystery of the missing landing craft. It turns out that after experiencing engine trouble, the craft had to return to land and lost the vehicles in the process. Sadly, even the landing craft weren't able to make it back safely. Now covered in marine life, with the tracks of the tanks making a great seating area for local crabs, the location is designated as a scheduled monument for divers and explorers to visit as they please. Number 3. Motorbikes inside the SS Thistlegorm. Underwater photographer Tobias Friedrich captured the image of a lifetime back in 2018 when he took a photo of 2 trucks with motorbikes parked on the backs of them. While this sight might just seem like a regular picture, the bikes and trucks are from World War II. They're also at the bottom of the Red Sea on a sunken ship named the SS Thistlegorm. Aside from a green, mossy coating of algae and other marine life, the bikes, which are Norton 16H motorcycles, and the trucks, Fordson WOT3s, are in incredible shape. It almost looks as if you could wipe the green plants away and they'd be as good as new. You can even see the black rubber and the tracks of the motorcycle's tires poking through underneath. As for how the bikes, trucks, and the ship ended up here, it was sadly a casualty of the war. Set to restock the Allied forces fighting in Egypt, the SS Thistlegorm set off from Glasgow with all of its cargo packed and ready to be unloaded, explaining the reason why the motorcycles are so neatly parked on the back of the trucks. But bombing and bombardment from German naval vessels led to the Thistlegorm capsizing, sending it and its crucial supplies to the bottom of the Red Sea. Number 2. The B-29 bomber in Lake Mead. In the waters of Lake Mead, which forms part of the Hoover Dam Reservoir in Nevada, lies the remains of a B-29 bomber plane. B-29 bombers were an effective weapon for the U.S. during World War II, with many being utilized across the Pacific theater. But what's interesting about this plane is the fact that it never got to see conflict. Instead of carrying out attacks on military targets, this B-29 bomber that was constructed in 1945 towards the end of the war ended up on a completely different mission. Instead, it was used as a flying laboratory in the Cold War, where it was used to search for cosmic rays and other scientific phenomena that can happen at high altitudes. Soaring to heights of over 30,000 feet, as part of Project Apollo, the B-29 helped Dr. Carl Anderson, who's known for discovering the positron, and his team to make many amazing discoveries, including insights into terrestrial radiation, geomagnetic fields, and much more. The B-29's final flight came in 1948 when it was carrying equipment to measure sunlight at different altitudes. Some claim this mission was classified or had some other purpose, and others think this isn't true, especially since many of the findings made by Anderson and his team were made public to the international scientific world. The fatal mistake happened when the pilot flew too low to the surface of Lake Mead, managing to hit and scrape the engines off the bottom of the craft. As you might expect, this caused the plane to sink. Thankfully, all the crew on board survived, but the B-29 bomber and its science equipment are still out there in the lake. Number 1. The HMS Endurance. In 1915, over 100 years ago, the Irish explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton led his crew on a trans-Antarctic expedition, hoping to be the first adventurers to make a full land crossing over the icy southern continent. But their tale ended up being about survival, not exploration. Their ship, the wooden tall-masted HMS Endurance, ended up getting bogged down in sea ice. With no way to free the vessel, all the crew could do was watch as ice slowly crushed the ship, sending it down into the Antarctic Ocean. With heroic courage, the crew and their captain were able to survive, thanks in part to the explorer himself piloting a small lifeboat through the ice and rough seas in order to reach help. But what happened to the Endurance? In March 2022, the Falklands Maritime Heritage Trust was able to find the vessel with the help of an icebreaker ship and 2 remote-controlled submarines. Submerged at a depth of 10,000 feet in the Weddell Sea, the HMS Endurance was found in amazing shape. You can even clearly see the ship's name and an iconic golden star still on her stern. It's a miracle that a wooden vessel has remained in such great condition. Most of the time, bacteria and marine life would eat away at the wood of wrecks like this. Although the Endurance was covered in underwater life forms, thanks to the depth and the sub-zero temperatures, no wood-eating organisms live in the waters nearby. This amazing discovery took place on the 100th anniversary of Shackleton's funeral, a fitting tribute to an Antarctic naval hero. Thanks for watching. Which one of these underwater finds surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for another amazing video right here on American Eye.